When people talk about money, they usually think about cash, salaries, maybe inflation. But what if I told you the US dollar isn't just money? It's power, it's influence, and in many ways, it's control. Now, before we go deeper, if you like this kind of content, where we break down how money and power actually work, make sure you like the video and subscribe, because this story is not what most people think. The dollar didn't become the world's dominant currency naturally. It wasn't just free markets choosing the best system. It was engineered, built step by step, through deals most people never even heard about. And at the center of it all is something called the petrodollar system, a system that quietly tied global energy to American money. To understand how this started, we need to go back to 1944. World War II was ending. Europe was in ruins, and in a place called Bretton Woods, the United States helped design a new global financial system. The deal was simple. The dollar would become the world's reserve currency, and it would be backed by gold, $35 for 1 ounce. Other countries would tie their currencies to the dollar and trust the system, and for a while, it worked. The US had the gold. It had the strongest economy. The dollar felt solid, but by the 1960s, things started to crack. The US was spending heavily. War in Vietnam, massive social programs at home, and to fund it all, more dollars were printed. Soon, there were more dollars in the world than gold to back them. Countries noticed. France, under Charles de Gaulle, started demanding gold instead of holding dollars. And, slowly, US gold reserves began to drain. Then came the turning point. President Richard Nixon went on television and made a decision that changed everything. The dollar would no longer be backed by gold. Just like that, the foundation was gone. The dollar became paper, backed by nothing except trust. And for a moment, the entire system was at risk. Because if the dollar wasn't tied to gold anymore, why would the world keep using it? And then something happened. The oil crisis of 1973. Oil prices exploded. Countries realized something critical. Oil wasn't just a commodity. It was the foundation of the global economy. Whoever controlled oil controlled everything else. And that's when the real shift happened. Behind closed doors, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Not a public agreement, not something voted on. A quiet arrangement. The deal was simple. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in US dollars. No matter who bought it, they had to use dollars. In return, the US would guarantee Saudi security, sell weapons, protect the regime. And there was one more key piece. Saudi Arabia would take all those dollars and reinvest them back into the US financial system. Buying government debt, putting money into American banks. And just like that, the dollar had a new backing, not gold, energy. Now think about what that means. Every country needs oil. And if oil is priced in dollars, then every country needs dollars. Even countries that don't like the US, even countries that compete with it, they still need dollars just to keep their economies running. This is where the system becomes powerful. The demand for dollars isn't optional. It's built into the structure of the global economy. And those dollars don't just disappear, they flow back. From oil producers, into Wall Street, into US government debt. That gave the United States something no other country has. The ability to borrow endlessly in its own currency. To run deficits without collapsing. To print money and export the things. Consequences. And when things went wrong, the system didn't break. Other countries did. In the 1980s, banks took those recycled petrodollars and lent them to developing countries. Latin America borrowed heavily. At first, everything looked fine. Then interest rates rose. And suddenly, they couldn't pay. What followed was a lost decade. Crisis, austerity, IMF interventions, entire economies reshaped. while the financial system at the center remained protected. And here's the part most people avoid saying out loud. This wasn't just economics. It was structure, power flowing in one direction. Because the petrodollar didn't just create demand for dollars. It created dependence. And when countries tried to step outside that system, things got complicated. Iraq shifted away from the dollar. Libya talked about a gold-backed currency. Iran tried alternative systems. Each time, pressure followed. Sometimes economic, sometimes political, sometimes military. Officially, these events had many explanations. But the pattern is hard to ignore. Challenge the system, and the system responds. For decades, this arrangement held. It survived crises, wars, and shocks. It looked permanent, but nothing in history is permanent. And today, cracks are starting to show. China is buying oil in its own currency. Russia is trading outside the dollar system. Even Saudi Arabia has started signaling change. These aren't sudden collapses. They're slow shifts. But they matter. Because if oil stops being tied only to the dollar, then global demand for dollars weakens. And that changes everything. Because the real lesson here is simple. Money is not neutral. It never was. It's a tool of power. The value of your savings, the cost of energy, even the stability of entire countries can be shaped by decisions made in rooms you will never enter. The petrodollar system wasn't voted on, it wasn't explained, it was built. And like every system in history, it will eventually change. The question is not if, it's when. Because when systems like this shift, they don't do it slowly. They break. And when that happens, the people who understood early adapt. The rest get caught in it. If this gave you a new perspective, like the video and subscribe. And if you want the full breakdown of how money and power really work, check out the full documentary on the channel.